Okay, so I've shown you the basics of using the brushes, and right now I just want you to be aware of the basics here, that you can change them, we can modify them by using the different brush controls, and you can open up lots of different windows over here that you want. I'm currently using the brush presets, the brushes and the presets. There's a navigator that allows you to zoom in and zoom out of your window, which is very handy. Wherever you move, this little rectangle allows you to see that. So that's kind of a handy way to move around. Also, if you hold down the space bar, you can also move around it as well. And if you hit Control Z, it'll bring things up to fit inside your window. And so basically what I'm doing is I've just created a layer to which I've added these paint strokes to. And what's nice is I can eliminate those. Okay. Again, I'm not trying to show you every single feature that's available, because that would take for a long time. But I do want to show you some features that are kind of handy, something that you'll be using a lot of, I think, for in this class. So I'm going to delete this layer too. I'm going to take this and just drag it down to my little trash can down here. And I'm going to get rid of this layer too. I can right click on and say delete layer. Yeah, I want to delete that. And I'm going to create a new empty layer. And I'm going to call this right eye. Now I'm going to show you something kind of neat. When you begin manipulating things in Photoshop, you know, as I showed you, you can select a region. Like I could select this part of this part of the image, and I could paint into it. So if I took my paint tool and I chose a brush and I chose a size, let's say I choose one of these, I could paint. Notice that I'm clicking and dragging out here, but only inside of the actual selection is being painted upon. Again, that's actually happening on that layer, which is something that I would not want to do. So I'm actually going to hit Control D to deselect and Control Alt Z to undo that. I'm going to go up to my right eye layer, and now if I paint again, I can just paint within that selection. Notice that I have a selection mask, but I'm going to hit Control Alt Z again, Control D to deselect. If I go up to my selection box, I'm going to eliminate my feather. And if I was to drag a box around here too and go to my paintbrush, I can paint then within that box, and it leaves me a nice, clean, perfect Control D, Control box. Oh, I did it again. So Control Alt Z. I need to choose the layer I want to paint within. Now I can paint here within this layer. And Control D, and now I have it here inside this layer, and it's not damaging the other. Okay. Control Alt Z, Control D to deselect. What I want to do is I want to be able to sample regions of this, and I want to duplicate something like this eye, and I want to give this koala. I call this the koala creeper project, or a study, because what I'm doing is I'm trying to get familiar with Photoshop and working with layers. So I'm going to say right eye, and I'm going to go to this tool here, which is called the clone tool, the clone stamp, and I'm going to select that. And it has the ability to sample pixels within one layer, and I can paint them. So I can sample pixels in this layer and paint them in this layer. So let me show you what that means. I'm going to go to my sample current and below. I'm choosing that because what it's going to do is it's going to look at whatever pixels are on this layer and below it. And so essentially it's going to be looking at this layer because this one's locked. So I want to paint into this layer. So I'm going to choose the brush that I want to use, which is just going to be a solid, brush like this with a little bit of a feather to it. And I'm going to hold down my Alt button to sample a region. So I'm going to click right here. and it samples those pixels. Notice those pixels are being carried up into this area. So what I'm doing is I'm sampling the pixels from this, since this is transparent, it's looking at these, and I'm going to paint those up here. So what it's going to do is watch what happens. As I start to paint, there's a little crosshair down there that is showing me, you can see how that's moving down below, and wherever that is, it is painting that region of the image up into the area where I'm painting up here. So I'm essentially painting the pixels from that eye region up into this eye region. Okay? Now, I like the way that looks. I'm going to grab that layer. I'm going to move it a little bit. And I can also then scale it down. I have my transform, I have my selection box here. Show transform tools is checked. And I can scale that eye down a little bit. And I'll hit enter when I like the size of it. And I'm going to just move that right about there. Move it around a little bit. I'm going to hit enter again. And I've given myself a right eye. And what I want to try to do, if I hit Control plus, I can get a little closer to that. I'm going to hit my space bar. And I can, I'm going to hit Control Z, my right eye layer. And I can move that to wherever I want. Okay? Now, one of the things that I want to do is I'm going to grab, not that, I'm actually going to lock that layer so I can't keep messing that up. I'm going to move that around here. And so, and then I'm going to make another layer, and I'm going to call this right eye fur. And I'm going to deselect that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to sample, I'm going to go to my right eye fur layer, and I'm going to go to my clone brush, and I'm going to say current and below, make sure I have that. Since this is empty, I'm going to be sampling this one, and I'm going to choose some of the fur around this part. As a matter of fact, I'm going to try to hide this, and I'm going to hold down Alt, and I'm going to sample some of the fur right here, because what I want to do is I want to paint that fur, and I'm going to use a brush that's a little less solid. So I'm going to actually take one of these noisy type brushes, and I'm going to go to my brush settings, and I'm going to not scatter it too much, but I don't want it to look like I'm just smearing it a little bit. And I'm going to paint some pixels around and over. I'm going to change the size of my brush using the... I'm going to paint the pixels around my eye so that it doesn't look as much. I'm going to sample these. So what I'm going to do is basically just try to cover up some of those edges around my eye. Control Alt Z. I don't like that. I'm going to grab some of these. Alt select. I'm going to maybe make my brush a little bit smaller. Get in a little bit closer. I'm going to hide this. I'm going to try to hide some of these edges by painting in some fur from the region of lighting in this area. I'm kind of just painting over, but I want the lighting from up here to kind of cover up. I'm going to sample kind of up and around so that I can hide that a little bit. Maybe paint some of those pixels. That looks like a splotch. So this is the kind of work I'm just going to be kind of checking on. Because what I want to do is that when I look at this from a distance, like I am here, those edges are fairly well hidden. right? I want to hide those. So I want to match the fur around here and around there. Say I wanted to do another one on this side. I'll make a layer. I'm going to call this left eye. And I'm going to go into here. I want to make sure this layer is selected. But I want to make sure I'm going to be selecting from this so it's not deleted. I'm going to go up to my clone stamp brush. And I'm going to select this area so that I'll be working around this area. Now the lighting is a little bit different, so I'm going to make sure I'm painting into that area, and I'm going to now I'm using the wrong brush, so I'm going to, since I made one continuous stroke, if I hit Control Z, it'll take that away. I need to go back to a harder brush here. Let's say double click it, and now I'm going to have a little easier time painting more of a consistent shape without worrying too much. Now I'm only going to just put in, I don't want it to be exactly a carbon copy of this, but I do want to get most of the eyeball there. And again, once I am done, I can shape that or scale it down just a little bit, and I can move it. Now if you're getting this where it's snapping, notice how those lines are causing it to align perfectly. I need to accept that transform. I need to go to View and go to Snap and uncheck Snap. Did you see that? Snap, and if I toggle it, it'll snap, and I don't want it to snap. I want to just move without those snapping. So I'm going to put this right about there. Now I have some, I'm going to hit Enter, and I'm going to make a new layer called Left Eye Fur. And I'm going to go back, got my clone brush, and I'm going to choose a, like I say, I'm going to use a stippled type of, I'm going to hide that eye. Oh, I can't hide this one. So I'm going to actually be painting under here. So I'm going to hit Alt, and I'm going to select this region. And I want to paint some of this fur here up on top of this. Some of this fur here. Basically, I just want to blend in these features. Now, it doesn't look too bad as is, so I want to blend in some of that. I might just be adding a little bit from here and there. But ultimately, I just want it to look like it kind of fits. Alright? And so, with that, I'm adding. Now, I'm not having to manipulate the colors too much because they're all from this same picture. Now, we're going to look at another example where we begin to manipulate the different images a little bit. So, as I'm kind of adding, I'm really starting to work with different layers, some of which they're very subtle. So if I get closer to this, my left eye, I might still want to paint a little bit more up and around or add to it. But I'm adding some regions. It's going to be subtle as you do these things. Because we want it to be subtle, we don't want it to be obvious. And so the changes that you make, you're going to be working really detailed and really in there working with things. So you're going to be doing some things like this. Alright, so these are some of the basic tools that you're going to be working with. Another tool that you could use is like a blur tool, which will allow you to blur, and you can adjust the strength of it. Say my left eye, let's say I wanted to blur the pixels within on my left eye. You can see that as I rub my brush over it, that eye begins to blur. Now I don't technically really want to do that, but I could. I could also go to a smear tool. If I hold this down, I can actually smudge it. I can smudge the pixels within, of the eye. You can see that I can smear those pixels out. I don't want to do that, but it is a possibility. It is something that you can do to manipulate and change things, blur in those edges. Alright, so that gives you kind of an idea of the clone brush. stamp, I guess.